The Sunday school lessons for April the 20th, 2025 are Christ dies and rises to new life, and they couldn't keep him down. Matthew chapter 27, verses 39 through 40, verses 45 through 54, and chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. Welcome, viewers and subscribers to my channel, Read With Me. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson with intermittent commentary. Please remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share this audio with others. Thank you for all that you do to help this channel grow one viewer and one subscriber at a time. Verses 39 through 40. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." The parallel account of Matthew 27, 39 through 40 reads almost the same. The parallel in Luke 23, 35 is more abbreviated. This verse is also similar to Psalm 22, verse 7. Verse 40. This mockery is based on Jesus' prediction in John 2, 19 through 20. Jesus was indeed on record as promising to raise the temple in 3 days were it to be destroyed. But the temple he had spoken of was his body. Jesus is not recorded as saying that he would destroy the temple in Jerusalem. Thus, the accusation who are going to destroy the temple came from the lips of false witnesses. To speak against a temple in the ancient world was to invite a death penalty. The taunt, "Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God," mirrors Satan's words during Jesus' temptation at the start of his ministry. This challenge can be seen as the final effort by the tempter to thwart God's plan. Interestingly, the designation the Son of God was used by others to describe Jesus, but never from the lips of Jesus himself. Jesus was called Son of God by both demons and worshipers. A voice from heaven was heard to say, "This is my Son, whom I love." Jesus' preferred self-designation was Son of Man. Jesus could indeed have come down from the cross, but he chose not to. In choosing to stay there and die, he offered his life as a sacrifice of atonement or propitiation, as he diverted the punishment for human sin onto himself, the sinless one. Verses 45 through 46. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Verse 45. Matthew 27, 41 through 44, not in today's lesson, documents further ridicule aimed at Jesus. When we come to Matthew 27, 45, the story shifts to a broader scene. Parallels to Matthew 27, 45 through 50 are Mark 15, 33 through 37, Luke 23, 44 through 46, and John 19, 28 through 30. The darkness that came over all the land was likely not an eclipse of the sun, as we understand that to mean when the moon moves between the sun and the earth. This is for 2 reasons. First, a normal eclipse of the sun lasts no more than 15 minutes. This darkness lasts 3 hours. Second, a normal eclipse of the sun requires a new moon. However, Jesus was crucified during Passover at full moon. This darkness, then, is of supernatural origin. The literal, physical darkness that occurred suggests a deeper application. In the Bible, the presence of darkness reveals God's displeasure. Since there is no natural explanation for the darkness, it can be considered a supernatural event orchestrated by God as a direct reaction to those who mocked the Messiah. Verse 46. We come to one of the seven cries by Jesus from the cross, also recorded in Mark chapter 15, verse 34. The cry is in Aramaic, which is a later form of Hebrew language. The words come from the beginning of Psalm 22, previously noted. Having been surrounded by taunts and darkness for hours, Jesus was enduring a separation from the Father in order to bear the punishment for humanity's sins. Verses 47 through 49. When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, putting it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." Verse 47. One of God's names in the Hebrew language is Elohim. When this word occurs in a construct sense that is combined with another word, one or more letters on the end of Elohim may be dropped off in the process of attaching another word. Two examples of this are Exodus 15 and 2 and Numbers 22:18. Psalm 21:1 Psalms 22:1, which Jesus was quoting, is of course the most important example. Here is the root of the misunderstanding of the part of some of those standing there. They heard the Aramaic word Eli, not as a cry to my God, but as calling on the name of the long ago prophet Elijah. There had been two previous misunderstandings, Elijah. Verse 48. We don't know the motive behind the action that we read here. If the one performing the action was hostile toward Jesus, then this act of giving him a drink was a continued mockery in some way. If the one performing the action was sympathetic, it may be intended as an act of kindness. Wine vinegar is mentioned elsewhere in the New Testament. Verse 49. The phrase, "leave him alone," indicates some impatience on the part of the mocking bystanders. They don't want the action of satisfying Jesus' thirst to interfere with anything else Jesus had to say or to otherwise distract from the appearance of Elijah. Verses 50 through 52. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Verse 50. The words Jesus cried out in a loud voice are recorded in Luke chapter 23, verse 46. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. John 19 and 30 further records Jesus as having said, "It is finished," as he died. This verse highlights two key aspects. First, Jesus maintained enough physical strength until his death to shout. Second, he remained in control of his life to the very end. Verse 51. Though Jesus appeared to have been abandoned by God, Matthew offers signs establishing the opposite. The curtain of the temple separated the temple's holy place from the most holy place. Only the high priest could pass behind that curtain to enter the most holy place, and that just happened once a year to offer the sacrificial blood on the Day of Atonement. As the 3 hours of darkness were supernatural in origin, so was his tearing of the temple curtain from top to bottom. Luke 23 and 45. The significance of this event is explained in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews 9, 11 through 12 and verse 24, and Hebrews 10, verses 19 through 20. The earthquake similarly points to divine action. God was clearly at work. In the Old Testament, earthquakes frequently signified God's presence and sometimes divine judgment. Therefore, the first century crowd witnessing the crucifixion would likely have understood this association. Matthew alone, in verse 52 through 53, tells of this additional sign. As his description continues, we understand this sign occurred not immediately as Jesus died, but a few days later after Jesus' resurrection. The designation, the holy city, refers to Jerusalem. Verses 53 through 54. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Let me restate that Matthew alone, in verse 53, tells us of this additional sign. As his description continues, we understand this sign occurred not immediately as Jesus died, but a few days later after Jesus' resurrection. The designation, the holy city, refers to Jerusalem. Matthew chapter 4, verse 5. Verse 54. A centurion was a Roman soldier who commanded a unit known as a century in a legion of the Roman army. Each century consisted of about 80 men. The centurion noted here was likely the one in charge of the crucifixion detail. Processing all he had experienced, the centurion sided against the mockers. His declaration, "Surely he was the Son of God," stems from his fear driven response to the supernatural occurrences around him. Jesus' disciples had a similar response when Jesus walked on water and calmed the storm. Matthew chapter 14, verses 28 through 33. Chapter 28, verses 1 through 4. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Verse 1. A long held view is that the passage of days in the ancient Jewish calendar are marked from sunset to sunset, Leviticus 23:32. Therefore, most students recognize that the Sabbath would have ended at sunset on the day before the action we see here. The women don't set out for their task until the first day of the week, Sunday, is in view. Sabbath was a day of rest, Luke 23:56. Their designation as Mary Magdalene and the other Mary reveal their key roles in Matthew's passion narrative. They were present at Jesus' crucifixion and saw where he was buried. Matthew 27:55 and verse 61. Mary Magdalene was a follower of Jesus from the early days of his ministry. Jesus had delivered her from demon possession, Luke 8 and 2. We remind ourselves that Magdalene is not a surname in the modern sense. Rather, it designates this particular Mary as being from Magdala. The other Mary was the mother of James and Joseph, and possibly the wife of Clopas, though the other Gospels name additional women. Matthew may have focused on these two because of their prominence among those of Jewish background, who first read his gospel. By the evil initiative of the Jewish leaders and the compassion of Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' body was not left as long on the cross. Joseph had provided the tomb, and the two women named Mary were eyewitnesses to the interment. Because the Sabbath would begin a short time after Jesus' death, his body could not be properly prepared for burial without violating the commandment not to work on the Sabbath. Verse 2. Again, an earthquake signaled divine action, given the results we see here. The angel rolled back the stone not to let Jesus out, but to let Jesus' followers in. They needed to see the tomb empty. The resurrected Lord could enter or exit a locked room without opening the door. He did not need the stone to be moved for his own benefit. Verse 3. There is no mistaking this angel for a human. His face and clothing are bright with light, suitable for supernatural encounters. Verse 4. The Roman governor Pilate had agreed to set a guard at the tomb to prevent Jesus' followers from removing his body and declaring he had been raised from the dead. Matthew chapter 27, verses 62 through 66. These are the guards noted here. The fact that they became like dead men is similar to John's reaction to seeing the ascended Jesus in Revelation 1 and 17. Verses 5 through 7. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." Verses 5 through 7. As the angel told Joseph at the beginning of Jesus' story, "Do not be afraid," Matthew 1 and 20, this angel tells the women the same. The wondrous scene they witnessed fulfilled Jesus' promise to be raised from the dead. Jesus' mysterious promise to die and rise again is now more apparent. It happened not as anyone expected, but precisely as he said. The emphasis on the empty tomb encounters any notion that Jesus' followers were only experiencing a spiritual resurrection of Christ. Jesus' physical resurrection involved the coming to life again of his physical body. The place where he lay was vacant. In verse 7, we find that the disciples who had abandoned Jesus in the garden were to be the first whom the women were to tell of his resurrection. He had warned them they would fail, yet promised to meet them afterwards in Galilee. The angel was saying nothing new, but was reaffirming Jesus' previous declarations. Key among these is the declaration, "You will see him." Jesus' resurrection was not an invisible event in the minds and hearts of the disciples. It was a physical event in space and time. The resurrected Jesus seen by many. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 6. Verses 8 through 10. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Verse 8. The women were filled with fear from such a close encounter with God and joy at what God had done. They obeyed the angel's words implicitly, running, an uncommon act for grown people in their time, to tell the other followers of Jesus. Verse 9. The angel commanded the women to tell his disciples that Jesus was alive, and they were on their way to do so without having yet seen him alive for themselves. But it wasn't long before they received personal confirmation as Jesus himself met them, with the women reacting as we read here. Though silent, their reaction to seeing Jesus showed recognition and reverence, affirming that even in his resurrected body, Jesus deserved the same worship as before his death. They offered to Jesus the honor due only to God. Soon they would be joined by many more. Matthew 28 and 17. That was verse 9. Now, verse 10. Jesus repeats the angel's encouragement and instructions regarding Galilee. A key aspect of Jesus' message is his enduring love for his disciples. Despite their fearful abandonment of him during his crucifixion and their absence at the tomb, Jesus continued to refer to them as his brothers. Again, this is nothing new. It's a reaffirmation of what he said before his death, Matthew 26:32, and so on. John 21 records the result of that gathering. Thank you so much for listening. Join me soon for the next reading of the lesson with intermittent commentary.